Yeah, so I saw this story. It was actually published by Ryan Hogg on January 15, 2025. So that was a couple of days ago. Stellantis exec says that European car maker was anti-American when it messed with customers' freedom of choice. So obviously this is Tim Kuniskis. Tim Kuniskis was the CEO of Dodge. He retired, I believe, or some would say he was forced out because the things that he wanted to do, they wouldn't allow him to do. And he retired, and that was under Carlos Tavares. And now Tim Kuniskis has been brought back to Ram, the truck brand. Now, he's been brought back to Ram. He hasn't been brought back to Dodge. They still have their own CEO. And there's also Christine Fuel, and she's the CEO over at Chrysler. Christine Fuel claims that Chrysler is going to start putting out products, which is amazing considering that at this point, Chrysler basically has nothing left except a minivan. They never gave us a Chrysler 300 Hellcat, and for the most part, they've discontinued making the 300. Meanwhile, Dodge has discontinued making the Dodge Charger and the Dodge Challenger, and instead they are now making the Dodge Charger electric vehicle, which I was able to sit in for the first time earlier today. And before I go on, I am still going to withhold my final judgment until a couple more of those cars come in and I finally actually drive one. But in sitting in it, I really wasn't really happy sitting in it, and I wasn't as comfortable as I'd hoped I'd be. I was sitting in front of the B pillar, which gave me this very odd feeling of not being protected. And it was kind of like sitting in the Challenger, except it was like a bigger version of the Challenger. To tell you the God's honest truth, I was actually way more comfortable sitting in the Cadillac Optic, which is actually smaller than my Lyric is. It's just that because it's more upright and it has a better seating position, or a more well thought out seating position, I was way more comfortable in that car. And I thought it was going to be small before I went and actually sat in it and, checked it out. I really think the problem with this Charger EV is the fact that, first of all, it's a rush product, but it's late to the party. It's a rushed product. It wasn't thought through. The architecture is 400 volts. It should have been 800 volts. It's late to the party. This thing is getting here so late until all of the other manufacturers, because I've tested the Volvos, I've tested pretty much everything else, Hyundai, Kia. Everybody else is way ahead. So this thing is rushed. It's late to the party. I did like certain aspects of the interior. Had that car been, say, like the Challenger version, and they still made the four-door version and they gave it a different face and everything and made it a little bit taller and a little bit bigger, I actually think it probably would work a little bit better, because there's a lot of people who'd rather have the four-door version. The interior was actually nice. All the materials in it felt exactly like the materials that they're currently using now. So those red seats, yeah, they look cool and everything, but it really didn't feel any different than what you get now. The materials that are being used on the doors and stuff, yeah, it's nice, but it really feels exactly like what you'd get now if you bought, say, a Jeep, like the Grand Cherokee. And I'm waiting to see the Wagoneer S, and I'm waiting to drive both of them. But to tell you the truth, I really wasn't that impressed with it, especially considering that I didn't really sit in it comfortably. So I will drive it to see how it feels and everything. But, I didn't really, I never liked the Challenger for that very reason. I never really liked that gigantic two-door coupe feel. I never really liked it. It's a very, very big car. And it's big because it was designed to be a four-door and then a two-door. But as you've seen, like with, say, Mercedes making the S-Class, they did way more to the car than simply snatch two doors off of it and keep the same front end. They didn't do that. And this car is really that size. It's the size of a Mercedes S-Class. But in any event, let me get back to the story. So it says it's been just over a month since car-making giant Stellantis shocked the corporate world by ousting its former CEO Carlos Tavares, but execs who remain are still diagnosing old problems with the automaker that caused it to hemorrhage sales in its key U.S. market. The freshly returned boss of its pickup truck brand Ram is the latest to highlight an area where the European headquartered automaker may have failed its American customers. Tim Kuniskis rejoined Stellantis soon after Tavarez' departure to head up Ram, having initially retired as an exec in May while Tavarez was in charge. Kuniskis, who had been with the company for 32 years before his departure, headed up Ram and Dodge and was overseeing Dodge's transition to electric muscle cars. Ram scrapped its Hemi V8 engine in favor of a twin-turbocharged Hurricane inline-six, which upset some of the car's fans. Despite the new engine setup offering a better performance level, according to several reviewers, Kuniskis believes anger over the switch was done to a typically American obsession: freedom. Honestly, the bigger issue is not Hemi versus T6, Kuniskis said in an interview with Road and Track. The bigger issue is we took away a fundamental American thing. Americans love freedom of choice more than anything. When you take away their freedom of choice and tell them you must take this, they revolt. Whether it makes sense or not, it doesn't matter. It's anti-American. You've taken away my flag away. Fuck you. It doesn't mean they are making an irrational decision. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I don't know, but we as Americans, that's what we do. Stellantis was formed out of a 2021 merger between Chrysler Fiat and PSA Group, which owned Peugeot. Tavarez, who was chairman of the PSA Group, was chosen to head up Stellantis. Ram forms a key pillar of Stellantis' market in the U.S., while also selling the Chrysler, Dodge, and Jeep brands. While the car maker had early success in its new iteration in the U.S. as spending rose following the COVID-19 pandemic, it soon ran into severe difficulties. Sales of Ram pickup trucks declined by 18% last year, while the car maker reduced deliveries to dealers in an attempt to reduce a backlog of inventory. The group's market share in the U.S. plunged to a low of 7.2% in July last year, having routinely set in the double digits prior. After his departure, executives criticized Tavarez for taking control away from the North American bosses in favor of a global approach to sales. Stellantis underwent a premiumization push, hiking the price of the pickup trucks in the U.S., while other automakers engaged in a price war. Bernstein, the equity research group, argued Stellantis had a misplaced belief in its own pricing power after speaking to disgruntled dealers who felt the carmaker had forsaken its core customers without finding a more premium buyer. Several publications reported Tavarez was eventually ousted for presenting a turnaround plan that focused on short-term gains to save his reputation at the expense of the company's long-term health. His successor, Agnelli family member John Elkann, has promised to rebuild Stellantis' relationship with dealers and install Kuniskis as the official CEO of Ram brand in a bid to reshape its faltering approach to the U.S. And apparently that's it for this story. I would have expected there to be more, but as you can see, the headlines: Stellantis fourth quarter shipments fall by 9%, which you can see reflected in the stock, which has fallen below $13. How Chrysler executive plan to revamp the declining brand. That was 1 week ago. I may have mentioned that a week ago. But first of all, there's a couple of things you have to understand, especially about the American buyer. First of all, this is not the same market that I hate to say grew up in, because I'll say it like this. I've owned a bunch of their cars. I've owned several of their cars. My first car was a 2006 Chrysler 300. I got that car with shit credit, and that car was like $27,000. And I was paying top dollar because I had shit credit to own that car. And I should have been paying, let's say, less than half what I was paying, but I had a bad interest rate because I had shitty credit when I bought it. But that's the car I wanted to start driving with, and that's the car I bought. Then after that, I traded up after repairing my credit and getting it on the road towards recovery, somewhere around the 700 range. And this was back in, 2008, 2008 or 2007, I purchased a 2006 300 SRT 8. So I had the 300 SRT 8, and then later on got my credit even better, and I was able to upgrade to a 2012 Chrysler 300 SRT, and it was brand new. The first two cars we used. Then after that, as you know, I'd been making videos, obviously, but after that, I got the Jeep SRT, I got the Hellcat, and then I got, what else? And then after that, I got tired of their cars because of the fact that their service was disappointing. And this was this was post-pandemic, I'll say. The service was really disappointing. And for example, I took my Jeep in, I needed a new alternator. My car was in there, and I'm sure they'll blame the pandemic for it, but my car sat on the lot. My car was broken into. They wouldn't give me a loaner. I ended up having to rent, I believe it was a Hyundai Sonata, something like that. I had to rent a car for like months. I had a car for like 2 months. The next time, and post-pandemic, they had like the UAW strike, and I ended up having to rent another car again. So I actually had to go through the whole rental process twice. I was not reimbursed to the amount that I expected to be reimbursed. They made no effort to give me a loaner car. They made no effort to give me a loaner car. They even I went in and argued with them. And I was like, wait a minute, where's my car? And why can't I get a loaner? They made no effort to get me a loaner. It was, and I made videos about that. I think what it was at the time, I didn't want to say anything that was going to get back to them. But what ended up happening was my car was sitting on their lot, and the power was off. The car was broken into, and I shouldn't really say broken into. They forced their way into the car, and they rummaged through my stuff that was in the car. But I had no idea that car was going to sit on that lot that long. I made videos about it. And the thing that really pissed me off was the fact that they made no effort to get me into a loaner car. And then with the Jeep, there were parts on the Jeep, specifically those carbon fiber inserts that I've talked about. These things were like fucking plastic stickers that look like carbon fiber. And what pissed me off was the fact that the insurance, well, not really the insurance, I should say the warranty, refused to replace them more than twice. But here I have a part that you put on the car, you designed it, and the car, it's not my fault that your part sucked. I had other issues with water pump failures, thermostat failures, and those were covered by warranty. But I have to say, it's like if you're using cheap parts, and if Carlos Tavares had cheap parts on these newer cars that were failing, the bottom line is if you're putting cheap parts in the car, then that stuff should be warranted. For you to say, yeah, these stickers are going to cost like $400 or something like that for me to replace, I'm like, yo, that's got nothing to do with me. You put those parts on there. But bottom line is, I went there for an alternator. My car sat on their lot, and that was there was also issues the second time with my engine, and they ended up having to basically rebuild the engine. But the bottom line was, it was like I was disgusted with the service, and I noticed that there had steadily been a decline in service ever since Stellantis took over. So the bottom line is, I had made up my mind. I was like, yo, I'm done with these people. So I said, no, I'm going to take my money over to Cadillac or Mercedes or even BMW. But I'm not really a fan of BMWs. I don't like the way they look. The insides are kind of okay, but I don't like the way they look. But as far as restoring trust with your customers, this company has been overcharging these people, and they've been charging these people so much to get these cars, markups, market adjustments, this, that, and other. And some market adjustments, first of all, they've been doing this for a long time, because I remember back when the Hellcats first came out, 2015, the Challenger, they were talking about $5,000 markups. And at that time, $5,000, That's a ridiculous amount of money to have to pay over sticker. But then by the time the Trackhawk came out in 2018, like I've told the story over and over, I went to, and I'll just say it, I went to East Hills Chrysler, and these bastards literally told me, oh yeah, it's going to cost $30,000 over sticker. And this was before the Trackhawks even hit the lot. And I walked there with my checkbook in hand, and they were like, oh yeah, well, it's going to be $30,000 over sticker, a market adjustment before the truck even hit the lot. And at this point, I don't even, I don't have to use any hyperbole because people have already seen what they've been overcharging people. The demons came in, they're overcharging people over $100,000 in some cases. So bottom line is they've been ripping off the customer for a long time. Those cars, for the most part, had issues, stayed in the shops for different issues. And I don't think that the customer relationship, I don't think it's going to be easy to repair it. Now, Carlos Tavares did a very thorough job ruining that company, at least the American branch. Getting rid of the Hemi was a stupid idea. Getting rid of the Charger and the Challenger was a stupid idea. Not giving the 300 the same treatment as the other cars was a stupid idea. Trying to force electrification on everybody without continuing the other cars alongside the electric car, that was a stupid idea. I really think Chrysler, what's ironic about it is they were putting forth ancient dinosaur technology. And the simple fact is that all these people who want to brag about how loud their car is and everything, they were buying them because it was different than what else was available. At first, I would have said, yeah, these cars are bigger and more spacious. But the reality is now the competition started making larger and more spacious cars too. Like the Chrysler 300 and the Dodge Charger, when they came out, they were very large, they were very spacious. But then the competition swung back, and then you had Hyundai building Genesises, and then you had other companies, like even Cadillac started building their cars bigger, like the XTS, the CT6. Other companies started building cars bigger. GM started making the Impala. The Impala grew. Then you had Ford with the Ford 500. The Ford 500 grew to the Ford Taurus, which was basically like a monster truck. And then it went on, and they got rid of that, and they had the Lincoln MKS, and they got rid of that because they had made too many mistakes with the interior. The bottom line is, it's like, yeah, when those cars came out, they were very big, spacious cars, but then the competition caught right up to them. And then the other important thing that happened was people started switching between 2006 and 2009. More and more people started switching into the newly made crossovers. Chrysler had the Pacifica crossover. They gave up on that. They could have kept making that car. Instead, they renamed a minivan the Pacifica. I was like, what the hell are y'all doing? It's like, but it was very, very weird, the direction that company took. At this point, again, times have changed. Interest rates are high. Anything over a 3%, it's like basically the American public can't bear it. It's like right now, Americans are deep in credit card loan debt. Interest rates are sky high. But the other difference is now, most of them who were buying all of this shit in 2006 through 2020, they can't afford to buy this stuff anymore because the bigger issue is housing inaffordability, rent inaffordability. If you can't afford your rent, you can't afford a house, then you damn sure ain't looking at no Scat Pack. In 2020, they basically did a fire sale on these cars because they knew they had to get the old cars off the lot. So in 2020, they had to get those 2019s off the lots. They had to get those leftover 2018s. They had to get anything that was left over off the lots. So in 2020, to move cars, they basically said, okay, we'll give you like 0% financing, or we'll give you no payments for like 3 or 4 months. But the bottom line is, again, times have changed. When I bought my Hellcat, that thing was like $76,000 fully equipped as it was. The only things missing was like a moonroof And of course, there was no wide body package at that time. The wide body package alone added like $8,000 to the sticker price. And then on top of that, say a moonroof added another $1,000 or $1,500 to the sticker price. So that's like $10,000. So basically, that car should have topped out at about $86,000. Come 2021, when Stellantis realized they could get away with it, what did they do? They started slapping $15,000, $30,000 market adjustments on these cars. The Ram TRX, when that thing first came out, you could go to the dealership and those things were about $89,000, maybe even $99,000 for the launch edition. They slapped $30,000 markups on those things. Now you start seeing Ram TRXs $130,000 new. Stellantis went back to drawing board. They reprinted all those MSRP stickers. Those things were higher than I ever saw. Like when the Jeep Grand Cherokees first hit the lots, I saw the price on those things, the 4xe specifically, and I was like, you got to be kidding. They're charging SRT Jeep money for a fucking 4xe. Times have changed. So the biggest problem that I think Stellantis has at this point, like I was just watching a couple of videos. I watched Butter the Insider. I saw Knockout 360. And he was basically saying, oh, yeah, well, you're paying all this money for an electric car and blah, blah, blah. And the thing about it is, yeah, it's an $82,000 Scat Pack. It's a new body style and all that. Obviously, you're going to pay for the R&D. But the bottom line is, at this point, you don't have a choice. Either you buy the new thing or you keep the old thing. If you keep the old thing, then it's just the old thing. We have something called psychological obsolescence. Psychological obsolescence ensures that if you have something that's old, that with enough advertising, you're going to want to buy something that's new. Either that, or because you drive through your hood to your trap house or whatever it is, and people see your car, and they just say, oh, well, when are you going to get the new one? Or they see your car and they're like, oh, yeah, well, that thing's played out. Psychological obsolescence ensures that people are going to run out there and buy the new thing. Problem is, at this point, they can't afford to buy the new thing. They can barely afford their own rent. They can barely afford to eat. Bacon prices and eggs and bread and all that stuff are up. So the reality is, times have changed. It's like they're when I was sitting in that car, this Stage 2 Scat Pack, and I'm looking at this thing's got an $82,000 or $83,000 sticker. I'm thinking to myself, who are they targeting with this car? If this is the new product, this is the first of the new product, shouldn't you be putting out affordable models? And when I say affordable, I mean under $50,000. Here you've got this car where it says that the starting price on this car is $59,000. But the fully loaded price that I'm looking at on the stick is $82,000. So you've put almost $20,000 of add-ons onto this thing. Even when you look at the Ram trucks, the pricing on the Ram trucks has gone up considerably. I think they stopped making the Ram Classic. Like, you can't just get a regular Ram truck no more. It's like all of these things are like, I don't even know. They're like Winnebagos, they're so big. But the bottom line is, it's like times have changed. It almost appeared to me that maybe Dodge was going up market or Chrysler was going up market. Pretty much what Hyundai did. Hyundai said, okay, we're going to go up market. So they started making the Genesis brand. And then now they've got Genesis. They've got Hyundais. Basically, they want you to say it's a Genesis, but I call them Hyundais because they're Hyundais. And they got these things, and these things exceed $80,000. They've got Genesis G90s. These things exceed $100,000. So Hyundai is making $100,000 cars. And then Mercedes and BMW, their prices went ballistic. And they went even farther up market and say, oh, yeah, well, now it's $110,000 or $115,000 to start. It's just insane. But once again, times have changed. And I feel bad for people who think the market's going to crash. The market is not going to crash. The housing market is locked where it is. And when I say locked, there are people like me sitting in these houses with 3% mortgages. We ain't selling, ever. Like, we'll die before we sell. And even when we die, our children will take over these houses. Our children will live without paying rent. You'll still be paying rent, but our children will live without paying rent. You can't afford to simply move. You can't afford to simply rent somewhere else because there's fewer and fewer places available to rent because so many people can't afford to buy a house. You can't afford to sell your house and simply move to a new one because the interest rates are too high. The values of the houses themselves are still sky high. We have a market right now where, say, unless they suddenly start just building nothing but houses, nothing but single-family houses, and to the tune of 3 or 4 million of them, it's like nothing's going to change. Right now, we are locked in a housing market that would rather rent to you. This car market is also very, very interesting to me. And I think a lot of people, not only are they upset that they can't afford what's new, because you're talking about $82,000 for one of these cars. That's ridiculous. That they're offering like 0% financing. They're offering 0% leasing. But at $82,000, with a price exceeding that of even the Jeep Wagoneer S, the new electric Jeep Grand Cherokee replacement, you're talking about in excess of $1,000 to possibly $1,500 a month. Now, if they offer a very, very aggressive lease and say, yeah, if you give us $7,000 down, we'll put you in for $1,000 a month, or $899 a month, or $799 a month. Yeah, that's one thing. It's an aggressive lease. But now you're talking about residual value that dips below 50%. So they've put people into a situation, especially, the Dodge Chrysler owners, they've put them into a situation they can't upgrade. They can't. This is the first time, like, you used to be able to go from an SXT to a GT, or go from an SXT to a Scat Pack and then to a Hellcat. There is no upgrade path at this point. At this point, it's all or nothing. You have to go straight to the top, and the top is probably something you don't want. So they've really put the screws on them. Now, I got to argue with these people. Oh, the V8, it'll be back and all that. Listen, the V8 may come back for the trucks, but I really don't think that they're... And they very well might be right now on the drawing board trying to put these V8s back into these cars. But the problem is the European emission standards that they're trying to comply with by 2030. You got to understand, especially after Volkswagen got caught cheating, and I think even Chrysler got caught, or I should say Chrysler, Fiat, Jeep, CDJR, whatever, they got caught cheating. And they have to pay these massive amounts of government tax credit. The government itself is forcing these manufacturers to get rid of these dinosaur cars, these gas-guzzling dinosaurs. They're forcing them to get rid of them. Some people think that just because Trump is in office that he's going to change everything. To tell you the God's honest truth, I don't believe that for even a second. And you may say, oh, why'd you vote for him? Because I wasn't fucking voting for Kamala Harris. If nothing more than that. But other than that, he may change the emissions requirements, but the emissions requirements only apply here. Europe is not changing those emission requirements. After the devastation in California and LA from these fires that now they're trying to blame on global warming rather than the mayor and the governor's incompetence, you can bet that the emission standards may even get tighter as far as preventing climate change. Europe is not changing it. Thanks to that Ukraine war, and thanks to the sanctions on Russia, and thanks to cheap Russian gas being sanctioned, they're not going backwards. They're going to continue to move forwards with electric vehicles. America and Europe are trying to also compete with China when it comes to electric vehicles. I am 100% certain, and you won't hear them admit it just yet. Sometimes you do hear them admit it, but it's sporadic. I absolutely believe that America at this point has nothing to offer except militarism, and China has decided that they're going to compete economically They don't have to use a single bullet. They don't have to fire a single shot. They are selling BYD in Brazil. BYD in Brazil is starting to do very well. Brazil has an ethanol gas background where basically their cars mostly use like ethanol down there because they have so much land to grow the stuff, the corn. But the reality is China is going to go into these countries. China is going to forge economic ties with these countries. China is going to offer them the help to build their infrastructure in exchange for their raw materials. America cannot compete with that. After I stayed in Singapore and Bali this past summer, and I saw the Chinese vehicle impact in Southeast Asia, Thailand and Philippines, no, America has no way to compete with that. They're going to try to compete with it, but they can't compete with that. China's electric vehicles are the new thing, and there's nothing you can do about it. They're cheaper, they're better made, they're more feature-rich. Their workers may get paid less, but at the end of the day, the buyer who buys the car, they don't give a shit. They don't care what the... And then that's not even 100% true because the worker in China is still working. He has a job, so he ain't worried about it. And then they've moved on also to robotics. So the thing about it is those robot laborers, they're not complaining. But the bottom line is, yeah, I do agree with the article. Carlos Tavares was a disaster. But when I look at it from the perspective of Carlos Tavares, like I've heard him speak a couple of times about what was going on before he was forced out. The reality is he had no choice. Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram have been on the chopping block multiple times. They had to file bankruptcy. They were bought by Cerebus LLC, and then after that by Fiat FCA, and that was after they got dumped from Mercedes and Daimler Benz. So you're dealing with this company that's been passed around like a cheap hooker, and even though there is equity in the name badges, the problem is nobody wants to keep building the cars that Americans want when they can't be profitable elsewhere. First of all, the American consumer, no matter what you think, the American consumer is broke. I just spent all this time laying out my case about rent and housing. The American consumer on average is not sitting around waiting to go out and buy a Dodge Demon. They don't have that kind of money. The average American consumer is the one who's buying a SXT Charger under $40,000. When those cars came out, what was it, like 2014, 2015, those SXT Chargers, I have it in my Hellcat video. Those things were like $27,995. You went from $27,995. You went from close to $30,000 to a starting price of $59,000. You've gone up $20,000 on the American consumer. That's not going to work. So the reality is there's way more competition now. And then you've got to factor in the electric vehicle competition. People want what's new. Gas cars, yes, I totally understand that there's certain people who are not ready to make the switch from gas to electric. I totally understand that there's people who have to drive large amounts of distance. They don't have the time to charge cars. I totally understand that. But the reality is a lot of people want what's new. Anybody who's still buying a Tesla, they're okay with Elon Musk. They want the new thing. They're totally fine with Elon Musk. Now, there are a couple of snowflakes that are angry about Elon Musk and what he did to Twitter and how he helped Trump. But the reality is anybody who's buying a Tesla right now, they don't give a shit about none of those politics. They just don't care. Maybe they don't know. Maybe they don't care. But the bottom line is they see those cars and they like those cars and they want those cars. If you don't want a Tesla, there's a lot of other electric options out there. But the reality is that's the future. Toyota gave up on hydrogen cars. They gave up. They're BZ4X was outselling their Mirai by a large margin. And the BZ4X is probably one of the worst electric vehicles you can buy. It has shitty charging technology. The wheels were literally falling off of the car because they weren't bolted on right or whatever in the very beginning. But that's probably one of the worst electric vehicles you could buy. And it was still outselling their hydrogen vehicles. I have pictures, in fact, of I go to a charging station where it's all BZ4Xs lined up side by side charging. So the bottom line is electric is coming. The infrastructure is still in its infancy. It's still growing. Now the new car manufacturers are starting to put NACS charging in their cars so that you can use the Tesla infrastructure almost immediately. But that's the bottom line. That's where we're going. In 20 years, electric vehicles, cars will be the thing. Now, trucks may take a little bit longer, but for the most part, no. It looks to me like they've basically given up on putting V8s in passenger cars. Mercedes-Benz is going to get to the point where the S-Class does not have a V8. You look at Cadillac. Cadillac made that North Star V8. Now the only car you can get that V8 in is that Escalade. Ford gave up on their V8s a while back. They put in those EcoBoost twin turbo 6s. And in order to take your mind off the fact that you ain't getting a V8 no more, what did they do? They switched up the interiors. They made the Navigator look nicer. They made the cars look nicer and such and such. But the reality is, no, these V8s, they're gone. They're on their way out. They're just like the manual transmission. These are dinosaurs. These things are on their way out. And the V6 may soon follow. It may not be immediate because they're going to keep them around a little while for the crossovers. But 30 years from now, the V8 is going to be the V8 in anything is going to be a classic car, and you're not going to be able to buy it. California, New York, the big blue states, they're going to make it so that you can't even afford to register those things. They're going to tax the shit out of you, or they'll outright prohibit them. And they'll say, yeah, you're not allowed to drive those because they cause global warming. Toodles. And that'll be what they'll do. Because you already see it coming. California already has extremely strict laws against what the mufflers and exhaust and all this. Certain cars you can't even sell there. So as far as Tim Kuniskis talking about Americans and their freedom and everything, yeah, I understand that some people are upset about you messing with their options and their choices, but the reality is you don't have a right to drive. Driving is a privilege. There is no constitutional right to drive. You have the right to own a vehicle, but you don't. First of all, you don't have the right to run it. And you don't have the right to drive it. If they pass laws that say you're not allowed to emit certain gases and chemicals, that's it. And they've already basically done that. That's the reason why cars had to get catalytic converters. That's the reason why they have to have mufflers, otherwise they won't pass inspection. And therefore, if you have a car and you take the mufflers and certain parts off, you may be committing a federal violation. And if they catch your ass, they're going to shove a ticket right up your ass. So if you're one of these assholes who drives by my house and I got to hear that shitty, horrible Honda fart can muffler or those crappy BMW fart can, if I have to hear that nonsense, when they've got those cameras that are constantly listening, because they got those cameras and they listen for sound, and you get that $1,000 ticket in the mail, yeah, well, we'll see then. We'll see in court. But the bottom line is they ain't no right to drive. It's a privilege. You have a right to own the cars. You can have a garage where you keep the cars, but you don't have a right to drive them. That's a privilege. A lot of people must have misunderstood the difference. 30 years from now, these cars are they're probably not even going to exist no more. They're going to be dinosaurs. Like, they're going to be extinct like the dinosaurs. And that's just where it's going. And, hey, it is what it is. And people, but what are they going to do to the roads? They're so heavy. Excuse me, have you been paying attention? The government seems to like to keep people working on the roads. We got potholes and shit they still haven't fixed. And they weren't caused by electric vehicles. They were caused by trucks. But now that look at them, they're putting out 9,000-pound cars now. They got Hummers, Sierra EVs, Silverado EVs. They're putting out 9,000-pound trucks now. It's incredible, the shit that they're putting out. And the Escalade weighs damn near 10,000 pounds. Like, they're putting out shit that I never imagined that they would put. I never imagined you'd be driving around in a car that could weigh 10,000 pounds. And it's a car. And it does 0 to 60 in 4 fucking seconds. I never imagined no shit like that. Like, that's crazy. That's like driving the Starship Enterprise around. But that's where we're going. So Tim Kuniskis, yeah, he's right. He's right. You know, the customers are angry, but guess what? You screwed them in the pockets first. But them 3% interest rates ain't coming back no time soon. And if these are the price tags, if you're not giving these people a price tag under $50,000 and you're starting like the Hornet, I would have thought that with the Dodge Hornet, I would have thought they had learned their lesson. They're like, wait a minute, these things are way too expensive. These people can't afford this stuff. And the Hornet is a lackluster product. It's a small SUV. A Hornet shouldn't cost any more than about $30,000 loaded. It's a small SUV. I'd be willing to pay more for a Dodge Journey than a Hornet. That's where I'm at. $55,000 for a stupid ass Dodge Hornet. And I felt bad for them because they were trying to hype it up and they were trying to make it sound like it was exciting. It's not exciting. It's small and it's slow. Oh, well, we've got the power shot button. Nobody gives a fucking power. What? I have to push a button to give me a little extra power to pass somebody? Hey, we have a different button for that. It's called the ignition pedal. Or it's called the gas pedal. You know, why am I pushing a button on the steering wheel for a little extra power to pass somebody? Hyundai and Kia do that. They call it a boost button. And when you do that, it gives you like 10 seconds of boost. It's like, excuse me, why can't you just make the gas pedal do that? If I push my foot down 80%, it gives me full power. And if I push it down the other 20%, it gives me 100%. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. But I don't think they thought this through. I don't think they understand how to market this stuff. And I think they've been so busy ripping people off by overcharging on stuff and giving them less and less quality service. I think they're in trouble. I think they're in trouble. So who knows what's going to happen to them? 4 or 5 years from now, who knows? I don't know. But the bottom line is they've made lots of mistakes, and they're going to pay for them. Carlos Tavares got his golden parachute. Carlos Tavares skipped and danced out of the door. He got his compensation. Carlos Tavares, he's got enough money where he'll still be driving the most powerful of gas cars. He might buy a Bugatti. He'll be driving the most powerful of gas cars while everybody else is buying electric Dodge Chargers. So that's just where it is. So good luck to Tim. I don't know what they're going to do. Supposedly they're going to bring out another V8 Ram truck. Okay, great. But, good luck because it's going to, only time will tell.
To be continued.